Somewhere over the Strait of Hormuz, 2026, an A-10 Thunderbolt II banks low hunting small fast boats that don't show up cleanly on a fighter jet's radar, but show up perfectly to a pilot flying slow enough to actually see them. This isn't a training exercise, it's Operation Epic Fury, a real campaign against Iranian naval and missile targets, and the aircraft doing some of the most dangerous, most improvised work in it. Welcome to Skyline Blue Aviation Channel, where we learn about jets and learn about why they build and why it is important for any nation to have fighter jets. Is a design finalized before the pilot flying it was born? Elsewhere in that same campaign, a multi-day rescue operation unfolds to pull a downed F-15E Strike Eagle weapons officer out of hostile territory deep behind enemy lines, the aircraft covering that extraction, keeping enemy fighters pinned down long enough for a rescue to happen, is the same jet the Air Force has spent nearly every year of the last decade trying to retire. One A-10 gets hit during the campaign and goes down over friendly territory. The pilot ejects safely. The airplane that absorbed that hit and still got its pilot home was designed in large part around the idea that combat aircraft should be built to survive damage, not just avoid it. By the time Epic Fury winds down, the numbers tell an uncomfortable story for anyone who assumed this aircraft was already gone. Dozens of A-10s flying real offensive missions in real combat against real air defenses decades after the first aircraft was built specifically to take its place. This is a story about an airplane that was supposed to have been replaced years ago. It's also a story about why every single time it wasn't. The accepted story about the A-10 goes something like this. It's a Cold War relic kept flying out of nostalgia and pilot affection more than operational necessity, and it's finally mercifully on its way out, replaced by the F-35, a genuinely more modern aircraft built specifically to take over its mission. Old plane, new plane, mission transferred. That's the story most people assume is basically finished. It isn't finished, and the reason why is the actual story here. The Air Force has attempted to retire the A-10 almost every single year for roughly the past decade, and almost every single year something has stopped it. Congress, operational necessity, or both. The F-35A was explicitly sold to lawmakers and the public as the A-10S replacement for close air support. In May 2026, the Air Force's own Chief of Staff General Kenneth Wilsback told the House Armed Services Committee directly that the F-35, despite being pitched as that replacement, still isn't a viable one. That's not a critic making that claim, that's the man running the Air Force on the record, admitting it to Congress about an aircraft his own service has spent years trying to phase out. The A-10 traces back to the early 1970s when the Air Force wanted a dedicated aircraft for exactly one job: flying low and slow over a battlefield, delivering sustained, accurate fire support to troops on the ground and surviving enemy fire well enough to do it more than once. Fairchild Republic built 716 of them between 1972 and 1984, each one centered around the GAU-8 Avenger, a 30mm rotary cannon so large that the aircraft was famously built around the gun rather than the other way around. It wasn't originally designed for the anti-insurgency missions that made it famous in Iraq and Afghanistan. It was built to stop Soviet tank columns in a European land war that fortunately never came. Somewhere in that Harvard survey data is a detail easy to miss. It wasn't pilots defending their own aircraft out of loyalty, it was Joint Terminal Attack Controllers, the troops on the ground, radio in hand, calling for help while under fire, rating the A-10 as more effective than its intended replacement for the F-15E weapons officer pulled out during that multi-day rescue operation in 2026. The aircraft circling overhead wasn't an aging airframe on a retirement list, it was the reason the extraction had air cover that could stay on station, see the battlefield clearly at low altitude, and keep firing long after a faster jet would have already burned through its fuel and gone home. 1716, the total number of A-10s ever built between 1972 and 1984, a production run that ended over 4 decades ago for an aircraft still flying real combat missions today. $209 billion, the minimum estimated cost of retiring the A-10 before the end of its planned service life, according to Harvard's 2019 cost-benefit analysis, the financial argument that's quietly outlasted multiple retirement attempts. 3103, the floor Congress set on the A-10 fleet for fiscal year 2026 after the Air Force asked to retire all 162 remaining aircraft, a number that means lawmakers, not the service that flies it, are still the ones deciding when this airplane is actually finished. Go back to that A-10 over the Strait of Hormuz. It wasn't flying that mission because no better aircraft existed in the Air Force's inventory. It was flying it because for that specific job, low, slow, dangerous, and unforgiving of any aircraft that can't take a hit and keep flying. Nothing built in the 50 years since has done it better. Every aircraft sent to replace the A-10 arrived with more speed, more stealth, and more sensors. None of them arrived with a reason for ground troops to trust it more. If the aircraft's own replacement still can't do its job as well as it what does obsolete actually mean?